Be on channel 399, and we encourage you to be a part of the conversation. Just join AYV News Facebook page and drop a comment or question about the issues we're discussing. We would factor them into the program. Now, in this final segment of the program, the Open Government Partnership and the Kingdom of Morocco have ended the 2022 OGP Africa and the Middle East Regional Meeting on 3rd November in Marrakech, Morocco. Now, this event brought together open government champions and stakeholders from the region, including Sierra Leone, and key international partners to raise collective ambition, energize the community, and generate new political support to make governments more transparent, accountable, and responsive to citizens. The meeting was also geared towards leveraging open government approaches to strengthen public service delivery in the region. So this morning, to discuss the outcome of the meeting, we have Kalilu Tutange, Chairman, National Council for Civic Education and Development, and OGP Point of Contact for Sierra Leone. We also have Francis Ben Kaifala, Esquire, his Commissioner of Anti-Corruption Commission. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
Kalilu, let's start off with you. You're the contact person for Sierra Leone. What's the OGP, and what does it mean for Sierra Leone's involvement and participation in the OGP?
Thank you very much. Well, as viewers will recall, Sierra Leone joined the Community of Nations within the Open Government Partnership in 2013. We made a commitment, both as government and civil society, to work together to effect a set of reforms that will make the government more accountable, much more open in the sense that it's transparent in the way it deals with its affairs. And so Sierra Leone joined, but in every 2 years, we have something we call the National Action Plan, in which we make a set of commitments on the different policy levels. We make a number of milestones which are indicators of whether we are meeting those commitments. For instance, we did the Open Government National Action Plan 3 for 2019 to 2021. In that National Action Plan 3, we made a set of 8 commitments and a number of milestones. One of the areas that we made commitments to is what we call Open Parliament. We said Parliament and civil society groups that work on the issues of Parliament, especially the Westminster Foundation for Democracy. They said Parliament had committed to open its doors to the people of Sierra Leone so that they can know how Parliament deals. For that to happen, we created an app, a parliamentary app, so that whether you are in Sierra Leone, whether you are in your village, as long as you care about what happens in Parliament, you can see the dealings in Parliament technologically. Parliament also held an open day in 2019, where they invited the public to go and see what they are doing. And they made, for the first time, they had a narrative report, annual report. They also had a financial annual report that they made open to the people of Sierra Leone. Thereafter, Parliament has been doing a set of things that commits itself to those milestones that we set. For instance, if you're approaching Parliament now, you will see a big board where Parliament has publicly outlined its mandate, and so that the public can be aware of what Parliament does. If you also go to Parliament, there are physical things that they are doing. For instance, they are building the ramp, which is to make Parliament accessible to people with disabilities. So on their part, they have done well. We also committed to access to justice. Now, normally, civil society groups would pull out press releases or go to the media on issues that they care about, even in the area of justice. What we decided to do this time around is to sit together as a body of refined-minded Sierra Leoneans, both in government and in civil society, to look at these issues. Instead of being at each other's throat, what can we do? Why don't we sit together and look at the things that we think need to be changed, and to see how we can work together to change those things so that we can make government more effective, so that services will be delivered to the people of Sierra Leone directly. So instead of agitation, we will now sit together and people from Justice Department, civil society groups, Carl and people like that are interested in justice reforms, we bring ideas together and we approach the leadership of the judiciary and government. So we have seen through the lobbying, through the advocacy, through the work that we are doing together jointly with the judiciary and even the law officers department, we have seen some drastic, rapid changes. For instance, more judges, more magistrates have been hired and placed into place. We saw the review of cases that the judiciary went on. So these are all progress that is being made in the area of reform. We didn't have to shout about it. We only needed to identify what are the things that we need to do to better improve things for the life of
just the question I would want to ask with regards to the reforms you're talking about. We go back to Parliament, for example, when the 5th Parliament was inaugurated. I mean, there was this promise of bringing MDAs to Parliament, the establishment of a question time, and the judiciary, the reforms. If we look at what does the OGP provide, I mean, that solid platform for providing the tool for or mechanisms for service delivery through participatory approaches. The judiciary, for example, we've always said it, I mean, its operations are shrouded in secrecy. Us, the citizens, do not have the direct involvement in how it is being run. The Parliament, we voted people in, but when it comes to transparency, we are left out. Even when we make opinions about the institution being the second most corrupt, then they will clamp down. So how does it work, creating that platform for citizens to be involved in all of these reforms you're talking about?
You know, these things take time. It wasn't like that. For the very first time in the last several years, we have seen live camera feed. You guys were there, live camera feed in the Supreme Court. That's a novelty. So that means progress is being made. Are we there yet? No, we are not there yet. But what is right, what is important is we're on the path towards what we're talking about. Let's talk about Parliament, for instance. Recently, sometime last year, Parliament itself signed an accord with civil society groups so that they can be part of the agenda setting for Parliament. So that civil society can now bring its wealth of experience to bear on the process of lawmaking. They can also help with the research that is required for Parliament to enhance its oversight functions. So these are positive baby steps, one can say, but again, they count to the march towards openness that we're looking towards. There are a lot of things that need to be done, but they cannot all be done in one swoop. What we're doing is we're approaching it with a lot of patience, with a lot of understanding, because the idea is people come together in a give and take kind of situation. Let us look at, for instance, what happened last time when the judiciary went to review its own cases of prisoners in holding centers, correctional facilities. That too was a novelty. Was it the ultimate thing? No, we cannot say it was the ultimate thing, but it was a step in the right direction. Our business in the open government family is to ensure that we use those leverages to ensure that services are being delivered to the people of Sierra Leone. Let's look at what we also did in the area of gender, for instance. There are lots of reforms that are needed in gender as far as it relates to SGBV and other areas. So we work at CGG, for instance, sits on the steering committee of the OGP Sierra Leone. So we identify them as our point people that are going to work with government. So instead of us taking out press releases and beginning to criticize government about what government is doing or what government is not doing, we identified key reforms that we thought government needed to make. Fortunately, the government acceded to that because we are working civil society and government together under one roof, around the table, discussing those issues. So we saw the president was very proactive. He appointed a gender minister because he realized there were very specific things that had to do with the gender. So he had a set-alone minister for that. Now, there is a bill. The bill is languishing in Parliament, but what the government did is to bring out the GWEP policy. The GWEP policy identifies some of those things that we were always been advocating for. For the longest time, we have been talking about 30% quota for women. But it has always been matches, people are holding placards, and when we decided, okay, the placard element is good, but there is also the issue of the meeting of minds. Coming together as civil society, bringing the right government institutions, sitting around the table and discussing this issue so that we can find a solution. Fortunately, we are making progress in all of these areas. So it's either a glass half full or a glass half empty. I'll decide to say our glass is half full.
Stay with us. Let's bring in
the commissioner,
from
this.
the Anti-Corruption Commission. You know, this year's conference, I think, focused on how government can approach the delivery of services, but also fundamentally how these services can be delivered with a focus of fighting corruption. Because, I mean, in the health sector, in the different sectors, it's only when corruption is eradicated or minimized, we can actually have service delivery. So what did it put on the table, especially when we talk about the delivery of services, but we're focused on fighting corruption?
Well, yes, thank you very much. The OGP and the fight against corruption are binaries, and that is why I'm here with my brother, the chairman, Tutangi. And I've always been supportive of their work, because when you talk about the fight against corruption, issues like asset declaration and access to information with the fight against corruption are all part of the commitments of OGP processes. And what was on the table, particularly in this conference, were things like debt transparency. When the government takes debt, how do they bring it out for the public to know that this is what is there? The reporting systems that are in place. These are all issues that we discuss about. Debt opacity, what debts are held in secrecy, how do they affect the overall accountability framework in the country? These are all issues we spoke about, but more generally we also spoke about leadership in the fight against corruption, how open and committed you are. And I was invited to be there because they are following what we are doing in Sierra Leone. They see how open we are. I mean, our website is one of the most active websites. Somebody in Holland once, a researcher in Holland once called me and said, "You people in Sierra Leone," I said, "I monitor anti-corruption institutions all across Africa. The one that every day you go to and you see something posted on their website is the Anti-Corruption Commission of Sierra Leone." So it's this degree of transparency, openness, the portals that are there, and of course, Chairman Tutangi and the coordinator at the OGP, Madam Hannah Karim and others, they are doing very well in trying to bring all the sectors together, including Parliament, who were there with the Speaker of Parliament. We are all on panels together and speaking about the great things that they are doing to bring about openness and transparency is actually the bedrock of the fight against corruption.
So just forgive me, just quickly, with that transparency you're talking about, that people can actually get to see what the ACC is doing. How do we use that as a model? Because the Right to Access Information Commission, for example, has always complained that institutions are not complying with the proactive disclosure of information. And you just talked about, for example, public debt. How is government taking? What's the payment plan? How much are we owing? For some reason, to some people, it has always been a secret. The public does not necessarily get to know how much do we owe, why are we paying, why are we getting the monies and all of that. So how can we take the transparency model and replicate that across MDAs, just so we're able to be a transparent and accountable nation?
I think that is what Chairman Tutangi and his team are actually doing at NASED, where you have the OGP subsuming under it. They have tried. So for example, let me give you, when I was on two separate panels on debt transparency and another one on debt opacity. And I was to speak on it. In the evening, I just remember, okay, let me reach out to Sajusu at the Ministry of Finance and ask him what they are doing, what are they doing. And he gave me a clear outline of what they are doing in terms of audit processes. Our debts are all audited in Sierra Leone, and these are best practices I shared. For example, they are mandated by the World Bank, or they are required by the World Bank to put out all debts, because one of the debts that OGP has been finding difficulty with is what they call SOE debts. State enterprises, their debts are usually not reported. It's the country debts, the bonds they take and all these things. But they have a website, and what was very impressive with my conversation with Sajusu that evening, the financial secretary, by the way, Mr. Sajusu. So when I spoke with him, within 5 minutes he forwarded to me the debt bulletin of Sierra Leone, which he says is on the website. He actually forwarded it on my WhatsApp. So what is happening in these years and what Mr. Tutangi and his team are doing is really impressive in trying to bring to these countries, to these institutions' attention that, look, the world has moved on. This is not the time anymore for us to do things in secrecy. Because when you put things out there, it helps with decision making, it helps with policy framework, policy formulation, it also helps with research, it also helps with advice to the government and from the government. So these are all things that are happening, and Other institutions have to understand this. We at the ACC have been awarded almost every year by the Right to Access of Information as the most transparent institution in Africa. I mean, in Sierra Leone, we have the plaques in our offices and things like that. Imagine if you are fighting corruption and you are this open, why should other people not be open? These are all things that we have to continue talking about, and that is why I'm giving this support. The ACC is giving this support to Chairman Totangi to actually send this message out that you can be open and still do your job.
You want to add something very quickly?
In line with that, you know, the ACC sits on the steering committee of the Open Government Partnership in Sierra Leone. We also have the Law Officers Department that all sit on that. You know, the challenge we have, fortunately, I mean, congratulations to you and your team. Sierra Leone also won 11 out of 20 on the MCC, and although the score decreased minimally, but anti-corruption is still scoring in 79%. So people wonder, how did they get these numbers from? You know, our partners in the Open Government Partnership Global sit in Washington, and all of these dynamics that people look at is, how do we share this information? Most of the things that they are asking for, we are actually doing. But because of the bureaucracy of the civil service, with all due respect, people, when you approach them to come to them, they send somebody who is not very important in their own office, who they do not have a need for that day, they send to those meetings. And they come back, they don't have a way of reporting some of this data that we're looking for. On their part, they sent us a manager, somebody at the manager level. So whatever transpires there, he's a go-between, you can carry it to them, and we can have a good word around what is going on. Only what we are asking is, in the global community in which we live, people have to understand how their government runs. You know, there's the NDI, the National Democratic Institute, they brought this brief. There are 3 briefs here. And it was one of the briefs that Ben was on that has to do with how members can counter, covert foreign political financing. And I was on the other panel, how OGP members can address foreign sponsor information manipulation. We always heard about trot. You know, people send messages and we don't understand where it's coming from. They send a deluge in social media with information. Some of them are not factual. You understand? How can we, as government institutions, as civil society, as media, as private sector, how do we come together to understand this dynamic? So what we went on was actually peer learning. We got some of our colleagues, 15 countries in all of Africa and the Middle East, and 3 of us, Sierra Leone, Morocco, and Jordan, were singled out by the CEO for a bilateral meeting so that he can better understand where we are going, some of the fine ideas that we're coming up with. Unfortunately, we're not getting the support that we need to get from the civil service corps especially. And we hope with the support of the commissioner and the speaker now is on our side, the things that we are doing, we're not bringing anything foreign. It's for us as Sierra Leoneans to understand, to sit together and begin to understand what are the things that we actually need to change about our governance.
Speaking of those things we need to change, while on international platform with MCC scorecard and other platforms, we're doing well as a country. When you take it home locally, there is still a conversation on 2 opinions. We're doing well, no, we're not doing well. So, Commissioner, where do you think the disparity lies? That internationally, Sierra Leone is acknowledged and recognized for making tremendous, efforts in the fight against corruption. But locally, when you talk to people, that is not the same opinion that resonates across. There are people who just still think, how do we pass internationally when locally it doesn't seem we're making progress, much progress in the fight against corruption?
You are a Christian, and Jesus Christ rightly puts about what happens to people who do well at home and how other people see it. So that is not, in a society where you have what we call cynicism, people are cynical. And you see, I always say that which is measurable is doable. Corruption is a benchmark, okay? You can, when Afrobarometer came and measured in 2017 and said that corruption prevalence in Sierra Leone was 70%, and the same Afrobarometer came and said corruption prevalence has reduced from 70% to 40%, they used benchmarks. It was easy for them to go and check, for example, what was happening at NRA before and what's happening at NRA now. What was happening in Parliament before, what's happening now. What's happening in the judiciary before, what's happening now. But that can be different from the perception of people because, for example, when the economy is not doing well, when the man is hungry, he sees everything gloomily. You ask him about food shortage, he says it's corruption. You ask him about inflation going up, the dollar is rising, it says it's corruption. Because they cannot draw the dichotomy between economic prevalence and conditions and actual fight against corruption. The fight against corruption is benchmarked on certain things, and Sierra Leone is hitting them right across the board. We are doing massive public education. We are doing massive prosecutions. Even yesterday, 5 people were convicted in the High Court. The press release is out there. We are doing a lot of prevention work. If you go in the MDAs, we are doing systems and processes reviews, identifying issues that are corrupt, asking them to reverse it, and it's working. Our national anti-corruption strategy is rated as one of the best in the world, and the follow-up on it is considered as one of the best benchmarks in the world, and the entire world wants to hear about the success story of Sierra Leone. So if you speak with a few people, they will say corruption is there because to them, it's what happens in their pocket really that is corruption, not necessarily what we are doing.
On corruption prevention, first of all, corruption, I remember during the president's inauguration speech, he spoke about corruption being one of the 3 wars he is waging in Sierra Leone.
Yes.
And in terms of corruption prevention, asset declaration comes in, which is also you know, an indicator to monitor unexplained wealth and, you know, put checks and balances in place for accountability.
Correct.
In that area, especially when it comes to public servants, we don't get to hear much from the Anti-Corruption Commission on the compliance of public servants with asset declaration and following up on unexplained wealth.
Now, again, that is the problem. Every year, the Anti-Corruption Commission, now, in fact, we've changed the law to make it, declaration is 2 yearly, okay? So this year is a declaration year, and as it stands now, we have had declaration. We have about over 80% compliance rate, when before it used to be about 30%, 40%. So that is, in fact, it's the best statistics in Africa when it comes to asset declaration and compliance, from the president to everybody. Recently, before I left for this conference in Marrakech, I signed letters to various departments, including Secretary to the President, of people in their institutions who have not yet complied. Ministers called and said, oh, I complied, I don't know what happened, I am ready to fix it. So if you are not hearing about it, does not mean much is not happening about it. Because usually, it is when the compliance rate is low that we are more active around it. But when the compliance rate is high, we merely receive it, and then we monitor the lifestyles of public servants so that we are capable of taking action against it, against issues that come up within the framework. So what I can tell you is that the asset declaration regime is working very well in Sierra
And so
Leone.
how is the ACC using the asset declaration to keep track of unexplained wealth of public servants, which is, you know, an automatic, you know, revealer or indicator of, you know, question marks and red flags? Because if you're expending more than you're earning, it's a problem. So how are you using it to keep track of unexplained wealth?
I have told you. There is what we call lifestyle audits, okay? Which are going on as we speak. This is a declaration here. Declaration cannot be going on and you are doing lifestyle audit at the same time. It is now we are doing the statistics, we are checking, and after that we are going to compare with the last declaration which happened 2 years ago, and then we start taking lifestyle audits. What I can assure you is that we are not just checking the lifestyle of public officers in Sierra Leone. We even have international partners who are also checking what is happening in their international accounts, what is happening with the assets and resources they have outside of the country. So, like I said, our work is such that it's not everything you have to always come out and start explaining and talking about. But I can assure you, Fabian, a lot is being done to check the lifestyle of public officers, to ensure that they are within check, and those that are to be held accountable will come out to the report as the case may be.
Sammy, I'm afraid we might turn this one into an
Accountability becomes part of the OGP.
It's just part of the initiative. But let me ask this question.
Accountability comes part of the OGP.
We have a 1991 constitution that puts socio-economic rights, well, as rights that are non-justiciable. We cannot
go to court, right?
Take the government to court to force or to coerce them to actually provide the social services. But now the open government is pushing that the social services must be delivered and must be done in a transparent manner. So how do we build a bridge with government understanding that their fundamental obligation is to ensure that transparently they are able to deliver for the people, and the people can also be part of the delivery process.
Yeah, that's important. You know, one of the challenges we have had over time, especially in our own situation here, is the politics of governance. The politics of governance have always threatened to derail the politics of service delivery, which is what actually people should care about the most. And what's in our drive in open government is to forget that government is run by political parties, and to try as much as possible to work across that line to see that the ultimate aim of people in government should be how they should use the offices that are entrusted to them to deliver services for the people. So what we do is the civil society activists, they have a lot of ideas, they have a drive to advocate on behalf of the people. Sometimes their approaches may become the very nemesis of their stay or their interaction with government. So we have devised a co-creation process where you have your own ideas. This is what government do. What is it that government can deliver realistically? Now, I've heard people say, oh, the president has not delivered on his manifesto promises. He has not done that. Okay, manifesto promises, they are very important, but you have to benchmark everything that happens. Where have we moved from point A to point A plus 1, or have we moved from point A to point B? How are we moving? Are the people coming along? Our business in the council that I run and the OGP by extension is to ensure that people have at least a modicum of idea about what government is doing in their name and how government is doing it. How can we do that better? Is to ensure that civil society and us in government sit together, we interface, and we agree on what government can realistically do. If it's a baby step, let us take it on behalf of our people. Service delivery is the most important thing, but people do not have basic knowledge and understanding. People do not have the basic skills and aptitudes. So that's why it's even important when we were at in Marrakech, we were talking about civic participation in OGP. It is very important that people get to understand what you are doing in their name and let them be a part of it. We have seen over time in the rehabilitation period, just people went and built markets. No, nobody is sitting in those markets. You didn't ask them for them to tell you that market is their priority. You went and built them a market far away from the center of town. They leave the market for the ghosts. They come and stand on the street. If there was a process of dialogue, it was a process of civic engagement and participation, people would have told them, okay, we may need a market, but this is where we want a market. Okay, no, market is not a priority. A health center is a priority. If you give the people what the people yearn for, chances are they are going to take care of it. If you give them what they don't want, they're going to trash it. So what we would encourage, both in government and civil society, let us continue to dialogue. Let us continue to have people participate in the development of that country.
And quickly, as you paint that picture of, needs assessment, are the priorities of the OGP in line with the priorities of the government?
Yeah, well, we cannot say, this is, that's what I talk about co-creation. We are looking at what do we think can happen that would enhance the openness of government, the transparency of government. Can government use technology to make it more open so that people can find out what they are doing? So we agree. It's a give and take. Civil society have their own idea. Government have their own idea. Is there a meeting point? That meeting point is where we at the Civic Education and OGP Secretariat, what we do is to ensure that government and civil society, they talk. They keep talking and we keep recording what they're talking, and we agree on something, we decide to work on it. For instance, one of the things that we are working on now, it is novel, it is new. The OGP CEO was talking about it, is open elections. People don't know what that means, because we always want to get to be at the throat of one another when it comes to the issues of election. But what we have agreed with the Electoral Commission of Sierra Leone is, whatever you do, open your doors so that the people can be a part of the electoral process. So even when they are doing that, people are, let them bring out the registration result, but they are now working with the political parties liaison, in the political parties liaison committee, that have all political parties, they have been given accreditation so that they can all sit around the table and do duplication. All of the processes, they're going to be a part of it. Our business is to ensure that that process works together for the good of all of us, not only shout about it.
Earlier, in your precursory remark, you talked about how we should try to minimize people who feel, dissatisfied, bringing out their agitation, but let's take the path of dialogue. And if we are to go that way, it's not a new model. Under the BO's administration, we've seen the establishment of a government CSO dialogue forum. But its potency is what is being questioned. For the longest of time, well, since its establishment, I think they've only met about 2 or 3 times, looking at some of the social services and how they can be delivered with input from the public. So the CSOs, they serve as vehicle between and from the people. So how do we, the question now is, if we have all of these brilliant initiatives that can help us maximize what we have, what is happening with consistency and having it known to the public?
No, all of these novel ideas take time to grow. And then already there are people who are within the system that are used to a particular way of doing things. Getting them to change their approach to those things is not going to be easy. So what we do is, are we going to bend their hands and break it? No. We, on our own way, we want to do it softly, so that they can begin to see the advantages of these things. Even in our own case, I've told you, when we call meetings where we want people to give us basic documents that we will show to our partners, you see, government is doing A, B, C, D. They are actually doing it, but they are not prepared to write a report or even submit the report. They create a lot of bureaucracy in that line. So to get something like this to take up the ground is not going to be easy. So what we are committed to is continue to harp on it, continue to work with them, to criticize them when it is necessary, but not to criticize them publicly, to go out to them, inform them, you should have done this, you should have done it, but anyway, let us do it this way. That way, we can begin to bring them along to understand that openness is the way of the world. And it's only openness that can bring the people along, because there's so much misunderstanding about what is going on in our country. Let's talk about the inflation, for instance. Let's talk about the free fall that our news is in. Is it because the government or the bank is not making a real foreign policy? Not exactly, because even the US, whose dollar is hitting up, do not like it the way it is, because of that, their exporters are not exporting enough, because people do not have the requisite US dollars to match up to their own market. So it's a whole fluid situation, because it's a global market trend that is going south on us. How do we handle that? Well, we have to sit with the governor and give him ideas that we have, and encourage him to talk to others who have ideas that are different from his. That is the approach that we think we should be taking.
Earlier, there was this issue of having, I think, charts in every institution you go, pasted on the wall, so that you're directed what to do, what not to do, what you should pay for, what you should not pay for, especially in the delivery of services. But in many institutions, it's not there anymore. But how do we get to a point?
That's the charter.
Yes,
the service charter.
Yeah.
At the entrance.
How do we get to a point where, for example, like you said, it's not because I do not know it is not happening, it is not happening. So how do we get, because for the public or for us Sierra Leoneans, we know it's happening when we know. And you can only proselytize us that, yes, it's happening when we know. So, and if we do not know, how do we get that out?
Problem. That is actually the problem. Because no matter how you know, we human beings have several limitations. One of them is limited knowledge. Okay, your attention span is very, very limited. 30 minutes, you are thinking about something else. You can't know everything.
Right.
But it is the assumption that it is not happening that is the problem. The assumptions that others are not putting in the effort that's not there. I was there. For example, I was sitting down with the CEO of OGP in a meeting where he was praising what is happening in Sierra Leone in various sectors that even I was not aware of. Okay? So it's also part of the openness and the explanations that people have to understand. People are excited about prosecutions, for example, at the ACC, convictions, it's easy for them to know that this public officer is being tried and everything. But trust me, the real power of our work at the ACC and why we are doing well in every index is the prevention that we are doing, the systems and process management. Nobody's interested for you to explain to them that we went to Ministry of Water Resources, we are checking whether the chairman can sign and all of this. Even when you are explaining it, they don't listen because that's not their interest. But if you say, one minister has been arrested today, the entire social media will descend within a few seconds and things like that. So we just have to understand that there is a lot happening that we do not understand. Even I at the ACC, sometimes people call me about cases, the investigations department are dealing issues. Some people call me, oh, this is happening. And I tell them, okay, I have to call the director to understand what is happening there. I cannot assume that I have all the information, that I know everything that's happening, but I can assure you, a lot is happening. When I reached out to the financial secretary at the Ministry of Finance, asking him about what they are doing about transparency, debt transparency, I didn't know that he had a debt bulletin. I didn't know that they were publishing debt bulletin every year on their website. But he sent it to me within 5 minutes. And I used it on a high-level panel. It was a plenary panel where you have everybody sitting down, broadcast all over the world, and I explained what we are doing in Sierra Leone, and he was there. Everybody was saying that these things that is happening in Sierra Leone, we think we need to really go there and understand them so that other countries can also learn from it and experience.
And part of the accountability is also the openness. We do have communications department in most of these MDAs. We also have, of course, a Ministry of Information, but then bringing out some of these information to the public. So what is known internationally is also known locally by the citizens who, of course, deserve to know that XYZ is happening. That XYZ is happening, but there's that gap. So how do we bridge that gap? Understanding that, of course, we do have the structures, the PR departments and all of that. How do we bridge that gap and make sure that information flows to the people?
Yeah, but that's the challenge that we are grappling with, isn't it? Because some people just believe, okay, we're doing this. Anybody knows, that's not business. They have to understand that they have a responsibility to the state, to the people who voted the leaders, to know what is going on. Because if most of these things, people are actually going out there and taking their time to not only do it in the media. Whatever happened with the going out there and sitting down, whatever happened with the town hall meeting, for instance, going and talking to people about it, let them see the lies in your eyes, let them see the truth in your nose, so that people can really appreciate what is going on. I think we need to do a lot more of that. Conjoining the people, sitting with them. I hear the president was up in the country going to places. Let them do more of that. Let them sit with people. Let them talk about the things that are going on. Okay, I promised you I was going to build you a skyscraper in this village, but I cannot build you a skyscraper because of ABCD. But I'm going to build you at least a water well. If you treat people with that kind of respect, they can understand what is going on in the process of governance. But unfortunately, some people who are in places or some offices see it as a point of entitlement. They don't see it as a responsibility to go out there and speak to the people so that people can understand what they are doing on their behalf. And that's why we appreciate people like the commissioner here. He's always telling people, going out there, holding, what is it, the lectures you hold on the campuses.
Town hall meetings.
These are very important. Yeah. People should be close to their leaders. Their leaders should speak it to them so that they can understand what their leaders are doing on their behalf. I hope they get to learn from that anyway.
And just to follow up, that's a very brilliant question. It's a very, very important question in terms of communicating what you're doing. And also there's something called effective communication. What means are you using? For example, at the ACC, everybody knows our PR is one of the best in the country. They coordinate very well, they bring things out, they put it out there. But also, let us understand. Behaviorally, there is a cutoff, there is a problem. There are times when you actually put out the information out there. For example, we do our press releases. We have a policy in ACC that all press releases should be 1 page. Because, of course, these things are, but research shows that the attention span of people are very limited. And usually, if you look at our press release, when you read the first paragraph, it has everything you need to know in that press release. Because also research has shown that most people don't go beyond that first paragraph. We put it out there. So, for example, I share it on my social media. You will see somebody, the very thing that is in the first sentence or the first paragraph, he goes under the comment section and says it's not there. So it's a question also for us to understand that these things happen. People sometimes hear what they want, and also there are filters that people deploy. You are telling them A, they are hearing B. You are telling them C, they are hearing C because of those filters that they deploy when you say A. Either it's because they think that, oh, this is an SLPP government speaking, or this is an APC government speaking, or this is a Mende man speaking, or it's a Timni man speaking, it's a Limba man speaking. And therefore, Chairman Nasser, you have a lot of role to play. We at ACC, right to access of information is giving us awards for putting out information. People are shocked. They write to me. For example, they were going out and saying when there was the money paid in this New York investigation, the account, you know, all of you were all, what is this thing? And I said, use the law, I will give you the answer. And somebody, I think it was Emmanuel Ablai or somebody from one journalist wrote to me and said, I want to know the account that this money was paid. He was shocked that I replied to give him the exact account. And other people have tried for other things, and we have given them the exact information. Sometimes I'm sitting down, I'm watching your newspaper programs, and people are sitting there, oh, the SEC is not giving out this information. Follow the rules. For example, asset declaration. The law says that when we receive our asset declaration, we cannot give out the content of that asset declaration except by court order. Now, somebody will sit down and say, oh, Ben is not saying what is the account of this minister and everybody. The law says I cannot. But the law also says that if you feel very strongly about it, go to court, get a court order, serve it up then. Trust me, when you serve that court order today, by tomorrow morning, you will have a copy of the asset declaration in your pocket. So it's also about people understanding these systems, to understand that the SEC commissioner, it is an office that requires a lot of common sense, a lot of control, a lot of discipline. And it's not everything you open your mouth about. But there are systems for you to access information. Follow the system, allow the system to work for you, and then you'll get it. I'm sure you too get the same information, and we have to educate the public.
Gentlemen, unfortunately, we do not have time. But just in 30 seconds each, what should we consider as the informative way forward in all of this?
Well, we're happy that we have Parliament on board. Parliament is key. They should use their oversight functions. And I'm glad that Parliament wants to work with civil society. There should be a point of conflict because we have to do a lot more oversight. You know, there are things that are going on within the realm of the executive. Parliament should call ministers or what people to account for what they are going on behalf of the people. Because the people have questions, but they cannot ask it directly. Parliament has to do that for them.
Thank you. Mr. Commissioner?
I would say we have to understand that data is power. Data is power in the 21st century. He who has control of data has control of the world. And our people, those who work in ministries, departments, and agencies have to take steps to make sure data, information are first of all developed, research-based, and they put it out there for people to have access to them. It will change the world around us without us knowing. So let us all work on making sure the information and data are not hidden. It is out there for everybody to see and have.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for being a part of the conversation this morning. It's been amazing having you here. Well, this is where we would end today's edition of Wake Up Sierra Leone. Would like to thank our guests for being a part of the program, and to you there, viewers and listeners, for your time. And those of you who dropped a comment on our Facebook page, thank you. We again apologize for the break we had in the transmission when we started the program this morning.
All right, just before we go, a reminder of our quote, which says responsibility equals accountability equals ownership. And a sense of ownership is the most powerful weapon a team or organization can have. And it comes from Patricia Susan Summit, an American women's college basketball head coach. With that, continue staying with us. We have interesting programs coming up. Until we meet again with more interesting topics here on Wake Up Sierra Leone, we have been your presenters. My name is Samuel Wise-Bangura.
And I am Phoebe Swill. Have a lovely day. Cheers.
Stations. We are your first and most reliable witnesses. We deliver a crisp and concise as usual.
With our modern broadcasting equipment, seamless coverage all around.
From all angles and perspectives on TV, radio, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
We serve you with nothing but unadulterated information. For sure, we are your trusted election hub. We will give you a round-the-clock update and a precise look and picture of the election.
We will uncover and probe the business side of the polls.
Who's buying whose vote and why you should be concerned.
We will assemble all the experts shaping the conversation. before, during, and after the elections.
We are ready. The tax ahead, we are more than ready.
We are your home of all things credible, factual, and all times balanced.
AYV.
AYV. AYV.
AYV.
AYV.
AYV.